The second issue that I want to address is the issue concerning the minibus service that has been, I guess, for lack of a better word, an agreement between the Minister of Tourism and Transport, the Honorable Sean Crocker, and VETCO. And the reason why I'm phrasing it like that, because the BIU, as being one of the social partners, was never even involved in the process. I have sent the Minister my concerns about what has transpired, that they have seen fit to go ahead and eliminate the buses from providing the beach service without even the involvement of the BIU. We haven't even been at the table, so naturally enough, we're very concerned. But I think equally concerned is what is should be disturbing to the country, is that the Minister has put out a press release basically saying that, you know, what is being said by, I guess, most people is that, and let me just quote exactly what he said. He went on to say some things, then he said, then that said, whilst we recognize that there has been some delays this week with the introduction of a new minibus schedule service, and these are his words, I must stress that the delays were not excessive as reported. Now, most of you were probably at Dockyard. You would have seen the long lines. You would have heard, if you haven't, people called in the talk shows and complained that they were waiting for a bus to get back to Dockyard or to leave Dockyard for 2 to 3 hours. Now, I don't know what the Minister considers excessive, but I can tell you, anytime you got to wait for public transportation for over 2 hours, that's excessive. So we are very concerned about the situation, because understanding whilst, you know, I heard Mr. Ray Charlton, who's the chairman of VETCO, call Everest Courtship and explain that there are probably going to be some minor hiccups of working out this new system, and all they've done is actually taking the minibuses and actually replace the seats that the buses used to be able to provide. So if the buses were providing 300 seats, now the minibuses are providing the same 300 seats, so what's the problem? The problem is that when the buses were providing those 300 seats, they were shorter seats. So the thing to do was to add on to the 300 seats, not make the same amount or take away. And I think that's basically what concerns, I guess, the visitors, and that's what concerns the public right now, is that if the buses were being used as public transportation and you had a shortage, why not leave the buses there and just add the minibuses to it, which would have been an enhancement. Now, this all went on last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I can tell you that I got a few phone calls on Friday evening that Marine Ports used to provide, and I'm saying Marine Ports, it might be somebody else, but my information is it's Marine Ports. This person used to sell the bus passes for the ferries and the buses. They were told around 3 o'clock on Thursday evening that they have to go and clean out the booth, because VETCO is going to take out the booth 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So when we look at this whole question about, and maybe this word is they might say I'm being a bit unkind to either VETCO, I'm being a bit unkind to the government, but I consider that a hostile takeover, because they weren't even giving a week's notice, a few days notice. They was giving a couple hours notice, get all this stuff out there by whatever time, because 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, VETCO is going to be running this booth. And that has to be very concerning. So when you hear Mr. Charlton and the Minister say that, you know, they have sat down, they've talked, and this thing has been well planned out, well, no way that was well planned out. Couldn't have been. So the issue concerning Dockyard and what's happening with the minibuses is very concerning to the BIU. And we are certainly imploring the Minister as well as VETCO to make sure that we can iron these things out. And what is very, I guess, even more startling is that they've done it right in the middle of the season. So if they had done it at the beginning or at the end, then you could say A, B, C, D. But they've done it in August when we've had, and I think the breakaway and the summit were just dropping about 6,000 passengers on the shores of Bermuda. So that's not the time to play with public transportation. And all I would say is that all the powers that be just need to make sure that all the stakeholders that need to be at the table to discuss what's going to happen with public transportation needs to be taken into consideration. Any questions?
Mr. Curry, the government has stated that the buses for bus drivers were getting overtime. Was that correct?
What I would say to you is that I can tell you that at least 75% of the bus drivers or 80% of them, we're not getting overtime. Most of the time we had daily order people that would probably be assigned to do the beach run. I know that, I want to say it was either last year, year before last, we had a conversation with Dan Simmons, and they brought back a few retired operators to do the beach runs and all that kind of stuff. So this thing about overtime being paid for the beach runs was totally, and I guess you can go to DPT and get this verified, exactly how many of the beach buses operators were actually getting overtime to do that run. And my understanding is that not many of them were getting it. So if they were short and they needed to bring somebody in or whatever because of sickness or vacation or whatever, then naturally enough, yeah, that might have happened. But I don't think it happened in, like when you hear people call in and say, well, my understanding is that, you know, the beach bus run was being provided by DPT and all those operators were being paid overtime. I can tell you that that's absolutely not true.
Tomorrow is another 2 cruise ships will be arriving.
Absolutely.
And just as I spoke with the manager out there, they foresee another problem tomorrow.
Well, I think that, you know, if you look at, you know, what has happened, and I'm only going by the information that's been given to me, so rather people are saying that I'm going by hearsay information or whatever it is, but when I called Mr. DeCosta show last week, he made it clear to me that this agreement, the minister had went to ECHO to tell them that they want to take over this transportation because they didn't want the bus involved anymore. And I found that very disturbing because, you know, recognizing that public transportation always has a role to play. If you look at the period that was put there, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, or it might be 7 years ago, and recognizing that these mega cruise ships that are coming, and prior to them putting the pier up there, you had never seen 5,000 or 6,000 visitors dropped in one place like that, because you had St. George's Pier, you had Hamilton, and you had Dockyard. So you had those 3 different piers where you'll drop those 5,000 or 6,000 passengers. Now you're talking about dropping all those passengers in one place, and we must be able to move those visitors, you know, in a timely manner. So you're going to need a combination of public transportation, private transportation to get that job done. And to say that you're going to pass it all on public, on the private to get it all done, it's not going to happen. So tomorrow, you're probably going to have another disaster up there tomorrow.
One last statement. I talked to one lady that's from New York, and she shared that Bermuda's public transportation is one of the safest in this side of the hemisphere.
Yeah.
And for them to disrupt or change is going to cause
Well,
continued problems.
Well, what I would say to that, you know, and maybe the minister doesn't mind that a few visitors are complaining about not being able to get some transportation in a couple hours or whatever. And one complaint from our point of view, it should be one complaint too many, because they're going to go back home and share that experience with their friends or their families and those sort of things. It should be very concerning to us as a country, and we should want to know how can we fix that. Any other questions?
Yeah, I travel on cruise ships and on the oasis of the seas.
Yeah.
It's kind of 6,000 passengers to the Caribbean. Not a problem. What is it you think is missing why we cannot get this system working as effectively as it can?
Well, one of the things I think needs to happen, Mr. Webb, you need to get all the stakeholders to the table, right? And too many times I think that, you know, one stakeholder or a few stakeholders may be left out for whatever reason. And I think that, you know, I've spoken to a few visitors that, you know, had to wait either at Dockyard or at Horseshoe Bay. And the thing that they're concerned about is that, you know, if you had the public transportation, why would you take it away? And I think the lady was absolutely right, and I think we were of the same opinion. If you had 6 or 8 buses last year, keep those 6 or 8 buses and add to that to improve on the system. Because you got to know that if you're going to take public transportation away, and let's look at it, a public bus carries what, 40 people standing, another 15, so you're talking about an area of 60 to 70 people that a public bus is going to carry. Versus a mini bus that's going to carry what, 15, 20 people? So now you're going to need these 3 vehicles or 2.5 vehicles or whatever to get to what one bus can carry. So you got to know that that's going to cause some problems. And I think that if we can get all the stakeholders to the table, I think we can sit down. Will we get it perfect? No, I think that if you look at some, and taking your point, we have the experience of other countries where they got, you know, where they're dropping 6,000 passengers, and how are they moving them? Are they moving them by public transportation as well as private? And if they are working together to do that, then why can't we not do that in Bermuda?
Just one question. So the vendor who was selling the bus and ferry passes. They were an official vendor, were they?
Yes, they work for, apparently they work for Marine and Ports. Because my understanding is now the lady has been moved to, I think it's the bureau down at Always Point. I'm just trying to get it up. Yeah. Visitor Service Bureau down there.
The problem last week, they were still selling 3-day bus passes, but there weren't sufficient buses to pick up the tourists. I mean, do you think this could have been avoided in your in-person opinion?
Well, you know what they say, if you start wrong, you're probably going to end up wrong. And the mere fact that they didn't start dotting the I's and cross the T's from the beginning, and for Mr. Charlton to come on and say, well, we've got some, some minor hiccups. These are not minor. These are major hiccups that we got in what we saw up there last week. It was a joke. It was almost like Bermuda had received cruise ships for the first time, and we didn't know what we were doing. That's my opinion. Because recognizing that, we've had a number of cruise ship seasons are now under, up in dockyard, and we're supposed to make it better and not worse for the visitor. And my opinion last week, we made it worse for him as opposed to making it better.